Those of us who profess vows in the Congregation of Holy Cross live according to a rule of life known as our constitutions. It's a beautiful document that offers insights into our community life and ministry. And as I reflect on the mystery of the resurrection this Easter, I'm reminded of one of the final lines of our constitutions, which reads, "We know we walk by Easter's first light, and it makes us long for its fullness." We know we walk by Easter's first light, and it makes us long for its fullness. My friends, I think it's fair to admit that in the course of our lives, it doesn't always feel as if we're walking by the light of Easter, or at least we can acknowledge that at times the light might seem rather dim. Even today, in this beautiful church amidst a beautiful liturgy, many of us continue to carry the weight of those parts of our life that may seem to diminish or obscure this light. We continue to live as broken people in a broken world, and we carry many crosses. And so I'd like to invite us to reflect together this Easter on the question, what does it mean to walk by the light of the resurrection? As with many of life's deeper questions, I'd like to suggest there's no better place to look for wisdom than the gospel, and no better guides than those who first witnessed the resurrection, and perhaps who even wrestled with the same question themselves. Our gospel today presents a rather dramatic account of Jesus' resurrection. The women who came to the tomb that morning were met with an earthquake, as an angel with an appearance of lightning came down from heaven, rolled away the stone from the tomb, and sat on it. We're told that the guards were so shaken with fear that they fainted. So it shouldn't be a surprise that the angel's first words to the women are, "Do not be afraid." To ensure that there are no doubts, the angel invites the women to inspect the tomb themselves, and then commands them to go quickly to share the news of Jesus' resurrection. And if that were not enough, the risen Jesus himself meets them on the way. He went to great lengths to leave little room for doubt that he had, as promised, conquered death. And yet we know that this is not the end of the story. In fact, in some ways, it's just the beginning. We know that even after encountering the truth of Jesus' resurrection, and despite their joy, those who witnessed it still wrestled with fear, doubt, and even shame. It was not long after the resurrection that Jesus' own disciples barricaded themselves in an upper room out of fear of those who had persecuted Jesus. It took time, and for many, if not all of the disciples, their entire lives, for the fullness of the resurrection's meaning to unfold. In that way, it really is fitting that in the Gospels, Jesus' resurrection coincides with dawn, because the light of Jesus' resurrection might be best described as that of a sunrise. When the sun rises in the morning, its full strength is not yet visible. Its light and warmth appears gradually throughout the day, first touching on what's most immediately before us, and only later encompassing everything else. And while the sun's rise might be gradual, it's also dependable and constant. For someone who walks in an unfamiliar place under the darkness of night, they may not know what new sights the sun will allow them to see more clearly. But we can trust that this fullness will eventually come. Even those of us who've experienced a long and dark winter in South Bend can have confidence that we'll once again enjoy the light of the sun. It's no coincidence, then, that the first witnesses to Jesus' resurrection from the dead arrived at his tomb at dawn, just as the first signs of sunrise were beginning to show. And it was important that Jesus' resurrection ushered in a new day, the full meaning of which would only become apparent over time as the disciples returned again and again to their encounter with the risen Lord, and allowed this experience to gradually pierce and shape their hearts. And we know these men and women were forever transformed by it. It's a reminder that we too must return again and again to our encounter with this risen Lord. Friends, the dawning of this new day also signified the very fulfillment of God's revelation to human beings. A revelation that began with the creation of human beings in Genesis, our first reading, and unfolded gradually through God's revelation to Abraham, to Moses, and to the Israelites, and finally to the disciples and each one of us who believe in the words of St. Paul, that we will be united with him in the resurrection. Friends, we have already seen the risen Lord, and by virtue of our baptism, including those who will be baptized here tonight, we have been called to live in the newness of life that our readings describe. The great adventure of our faith is the unfolding of what this means gradually and over the course of our lives. So what does this mean for us here and now? Let me offer just one final image that might help us to reflect on this question. As you might know, the mystery of Jesus' death and resurrection is central to the spirituality and identity of the Congregation of Holy Cross. This comes to us from our founder, Blessed Basil Moreau, a French priest and educator. Father Moreau established the congregation around 200 years ago, in the decades following the French Revolution, and he referred to the ministry carried out by Holy Cross as a work of resurrection. You see, the period following the French Revolution was a time of great crisis in the French church. The revolution targeted not only the French monarchy, but also those organizations and institutions that were seen to be aligned with it. This included the Catholic Church, which had built and operated many of France's educational institutions and shepherded the country's sacramental and spiritual life. After the revolution dismantled this world, what followed were many years of confusion and conflict as the French church and French society sought healing and unity. So when Father Moreau brought together priests, brothers, and sisters and sent them to teach and work in a number of pastoral settings, he very much had this sense that the work they were doing was renewing and even transforming both the individuals that Holy Cross served, as well as society as a whole. The work was intended to prepare them for better times than their own, or to put it even more poignantly, to bring life out of death. He believed firmly that God had called him to this work, and that ultimately, even if not in his own lifetime, God would bring it to completion. Father Moreau walked by Easter's first light. He couldn't yet see the fullness of what God had called him to, and in many ways never would. Those early days of Holy Cross's history were tumultuous, and Moreau navigated many crises. Financial difficulties, the loss of religious worldwide to disease and other untimely deaths, clashes with civil and even at times ecclesial authorities, and many spiritual battles. He was even for a time rejected by the very community that he had founded. Yet with whatever crosses that he had to bear, Father Moreau carried it with a deep and a profound confidence that it could be borne as a gift, and that through it, he would also encounter the resurrection. He understood something very important about this feast that we celebrate today, that while there may never be an Easter without Good Friday, there will also never be a Good Friday without Easter Sunday. It's for this reason that we in Holy Cross take as our community's motto, Ave Crux Spes Unica, Hail the Cross, our only hope. My friends, we too walk by Easter's first light. We cannot always see the fullness of Jesus' resurrection in our own lives. like Jesus' disciples, we're prone to doubt, fear, hesitancy, and shame. We may look at the darkness of our crosses in our lives or the scars that we carry and be tempted to despair or to wonder where God is in all of this. But the beauty of the resurrected Lord is that he does not explain away our suffering, and he does not erase it. Whenever Jesus seeks to prove to his disciples that it's really he who has risen, he does so by showing them his hands, his feet and side, the scars of his crucifixion. In a similar way, Jesus acknowledges and transforms our own wounds so that through them, we too can participate in his resurrection and invite others to do the same. We walk confidently by Easter's first light, regardless of how dim it may seem at any given moment in our lives. And we do so with great hope, trusting in the promise that we will one day bask in its fullness.